Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, and I'm all by myself this week as our own Amy Rivers gets a little well-deserved R&R. But the show must go on because state politics certainly is. Right now, the Iowa legislature has passed its deadline, go figure, on passing a budget for the coming fiscal year. Right now, it's all kind of hinged on this discussion around CO2 pipelines. I've got this explainer from Iowa Starting Line correspondent Chase Siebert.
Let's talk about the issue that is dividing Iowa Republicans in the State House and will lead to an interesting decision by Kim Reynolds. Late into the night on May 12th, Republican senators openly argued on the Iowa Senate floor during hours of heated debate as the chamber finally passed legislation limiting eminent domain use for carbon capture pipelines, delivering a win for property rights advocates after years of inaction. Reminder, Republicans dominate both the House and the Senate. They can pass anything they want. The biggest element of the debate came down to this: should the government be able to use eminent domain to take over property for fair market price for private projects like a carbon pipeline? Generally in Iowa, eminent domain is very unpopular, especially in rural areas, which is a lot of Iowa. Yet, Summit Carbon Solutions proposed an $8.9 billion carbon sequestration pipeline that would have spanned 2,500 miles across a few different states. And then there's Bruce Ratstetter, Summit's influential co-founder. He is a prominent Republican Party donor, and I think it's safe to say they've been pushing a lot of these Republicans to allow this pipeline to go through using eminent domain. I mean, Senator Mike Busala out of Ankeny tried to do an amendment which would have banned the use of eminent domain in the future, but not for Summit's proposed project. Side note, he's probably running for governor. And he also led external relations for Summit Agricultural Group, which owns Summit Carbon Solutions. This amendment got voted down. So now there is a bill limiting eminent domain use heading to Kim Reynolds' desk, and no one really knows what she's going to do.
I think the important thing to remember is who knows what the governor is going to do with this bill, especially given the moneyed interest supporting pipelines, carbon pipelines here in the state of Iowa. It's a story about power, but when the Senate passed that bill, it opened up the 12 Iowa senators who were dragging their feet on considering any budget proposals, right? So now the Iowa legislature has opened itself up to begin doing the work of trying to figure out how it's going to fund its state agencies. It's an extremely important job, one that we'll all be paying a lot of attention to. And outside of Budget Talk 2025, right now, it seems like every other headline, a new Iowan is throwing their hat in the race. And there's been quite a bit of excitement, particularly around one State Auditor Rob Sand, the sole elected statewide Democrat in the state of Iowa, has thrown his hat in for the governor's race. Now, this won't surprise most of you, given conversations we've had on this podcast, as well as the amount of fundraising that the guy has been doing. I mean, he's clearly been running to win this from the get-go. However, the announcement's now official, and he's hitting the ground on all cylinders. Iowa Starting Line just broke that he raised $2.25 million in the first 24 hours of his campaign. That's according to a release from his campaign. That's a story that we're going to be following really closely. And later on the show, you can catch a one-on-one between me and Rob Sand about his candidate launch and kind of what he has planned for the year ahead. But before we get there, Nico Agosta has been digging into your House of Representatives and your U.S. Senate members, crunching the numbers on their financial integrity. How much money are they receiving from special interests? How much of their money came from small donors in their district? It's an important bit of work, one that I've found it really refreshing, given the kind of candor that he's been bringing to the project. My conversation with Nico Agosta on his project, Stocking the Capitol, that's coming up on Cornhole Champions. Since the 2010 Citizens United ruling reversed long-standing campaign finance restrictions, large corporations and wealthy individuals have gained disproportionate influence on our elections. Americans overwhelmingly believe, like 85% of us say, that the cost of political campaigns makes it difficult for good people to run for office. Additionally, 84% of the public agrees that special interest groups and lobbyists have too much say in what happens in politics. Some polling from Pew Research Center, they did some open-ended questioning, And they found that 11% of Americans volunteer that the biggest problem with elected officials is that they are too influenced by money and politics. The 2020 presidential election was the most expensive to date, with costs estimated over $10 billion. And the 2026 election in Iowa is heating up to be one of the most expensive on record. Campaign finance is complicated, a soup of acronyms and reports and filing deadlines. It can be a little difficult to laser in on what exactly is happening. That's why I'm excited to speak with Nico Agosta. He's a 25-year-old who I first came across on TikTok. Through his series, Stocking the Capital, Nico's going through where the money is coming from and calling out members on stock trades and corporate money shenanigans.
Is your member of Congress a piece of shit? Let's find out. Today we're going to be grading the financial integrity of Marionette Miller Meeks from Iowa's 1st Congressional District. Alright, so she's been in office since 2021. Last cycle of the $5.4 million that she raised, 43% of those funds came from PACs, 6% of those funds came from small individual donations, while 35% of those funds came from large individual donations. She does not hold or trade any individual stocks. Instead, her estimated net worth of roughly $1.8 million is held mostly in mutual funds. As for corporate funds, she receives a lot, getting over $400,000 of corporate PAC money from 108 different corporate PACs. This includes max donations from the corporate PACs of Constellation Energy, John Deere, Home Depot, Alliant Energy, Marathon Petroleum, UPS, and Valero Energy. And for those counting along at home, 4 of those 7 companies are energy companies, and Rep. Miller Meeks serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Alright, so moving on to grading, the only thing helping her score at all is the fact that she doesn't hold or trade any individual stocks, but everything else isn't looking too great. Overall, Rep. Miller Meeks gets an F.
Hello, Nico.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Man, thanks for coming on. Stocking the Capital aims to grade the financial integrity of every member of Congress before the 2026 midterms. That's a ton of research, man. How are you managing so far?
I'm doing all right. I'm still working through every member, but it takes some time. Every rep, you got to do the research, and for me, being accurate is obviously very important as well. So can't go too fast.
Tell me a little bit about where this project started for you. You're 25. How did you get on this kind of trajectory?
I guess the kick in the butt was I was scrolling on Twitter, and I was actually going through one of Bernie Sanders' posts, looking in the comments section, which I don't recommend ever going in the comment section on Twitter. And there was just this stream of disinformation, misinformation, some of it about his net worth, some of it about corporate donations he receives. And it was information that I was pretty sure was false, but I thought, might as well quickly look this up. And, went to the FEC website, went to opensecrets.com, both great resources, and I was able to find pretty quickly that this information was false. But then I also understood that I could understand where folks were getting this misinformation or where it was starting to spread. And I thought, all right, a lot of people aren't going to do this. They're not going to go to the FEC website. They're not going to go to Open Secrets. Where's the best place I can put this information? And for me, that was, TikTok, Instagram, just put it right in front of people's faces, and, bring the information directly to them.
It's kind of a tangle to try to begin starting. I mean, did you have any training that got you started in this direction, or what was your first step?
Yeah, I had some social media experience in that, I made a few, silly videos I thought were funny and in college and whatnot. Nothing problematic or anything, but just stuff that got a few views. I think my channel already had a few thousand followers. We're talking though like 4,000 or 5,000 followers, which was just a launching point. When I started making this series, I have a political science background. And so I thought the content would take off with a certain audience. And it just so happened that I had kind of that follower base that, I think it was a good idea, and they seemed to think it was a good idea. And so it might have not worked if I, was starting a new channel with no followers. So I got lucky in that way.
Well, and I think what's interesting about it isn't just the kind of like rigor that you're bringing to it. I think it's also the grading system, right? On a grade of F to A, right? Very grade school, right? Where does this person rank? Can you walk me through like how you came up with that system? Like what was the approach there? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was something that, before I started the series, I actually tried to look up if this already existed, because The NRA classically gives out letter grades to politicians. There's also some sort of national education group that also will give a letter grade based on education policy. So I thought maybe this grading system already existed for this issue, looked into it, saw that it didn't. And I think that that's important as well. Like campaign finance is really complicated. And so you can look at raw numbers and you can make numbers sound really bad. You could say, well, this politician gets $30,000 of corporate PAC money. Well, is that a lot? Is that a little? Right? You need context. And so I tried to make the grading system to give a little bit more context to these numbers.
So, and let's talk about the kinds of pieces that fit into that equation, right? Because and maybe a way to get at that. Walk me through what for someone to get an F from your from your account. What does that look like in practice, right? Like what kinds of things are really dragging down someone's score?
Yeah. The way I have the scoring system set up, if any piece of your campaign finance or personal finance picture is, you can use the word corrupt enough, is problematic enough, you can fail essentially, right? So if you're someone who doesn't trade individual stocks, which is a big portion of the formula, so if you're clean in that aspect, but you do accept a lot of corporate PAC donations, another part of the formula, you can still get a failing grade.
Mm-hmm.
What we see in the lowest scoring members of Congress is kind of this trifecta, where they're not getting a lot of their money from individual donors. They are holding and trading individual stocks, and at the same time, they're receiving large amounts of corporate PAC money. Those are the folks who, I also give a score out of 100. Those are the folks who score under 20, which is very difficult to do, but some manage.
Okay, and for this work to get started, right? So you pick out. You've done 2 of Iowa's representatives, but you're gonna go look up U.S. Representative Randy Feenstra's numbers, right? Where do you begin? How do you begin that kind of search? What's the first thing you're checking? Walk me through that process.
Yeah, so I already name dropped them. OpenSecrets.com, they're great. They take the data directly from the FEC, the raw data, and they put it into a more digestible form. So I go there, I figure out how much money they raised last cycle. Open Secrets does a great percentage breakdown. So that's where I get the figures of how much of that money came from PACs. Those are non-corporate PACs and corporate PACs together in one number. And then also their individual donor splits. So how much is coming in donations above $200, but always below the $6,600 limit. And how many of those donations are small donations under that $200 limit. It's not a limit, I guess, under $200. That's where I get those numbers. If there's something unique about their campaign finance splits, something like they might get a lot of money from a leadership PAC or raise a lot of money in a joint fundraising committee, that's where I go to the FEC data, the raw data. That's just, if there's any confusion, if I find anything with the numbers that doesn't make sense to me, FEC data going to the raw data is always just kind of that final check.
Right.
But then when it comes to their individual stock trades and their personal finances, I use Quiver Quantitative. And then instead of going to the FEC, if I see something that doesn't make sense to me or looks a little problematic, I go to the House Clerk Office website, and that's where you can find you can find the raw disclosures and look through those. Yeah.
And we'll link to some of the resources that you're mentioning here, but I think that's an important thing to kind of bracket out here. Since 1971, candidates running for federal office have a certain number of reports that they need to file as just part of being a legal entity running for federal office, running for Congress in this case. And so much of the information that I'll be having beers with a friend, and someone will wonder how much are they taking from big ag, how much are they taking from petroleum industry. They'll have these like questions about like kind of what are the interests that are playing ball in the financing of our elections and the financing of our campaigns. And what's great, the great thing is that so much information is available at our fingertips, right? That we do have the ability to get it. But even then, right, I think that there's a little bit of question about like kind of where do I start? So a thing that I've appreciated both what you were saying about your process, but also like kind of the way you document that with your account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important. Putting the information in front of people is important, right? Because this is research that not a lot of people want to do or they don't know where to start. Right. Yeah. So I just put in front of them.
How much, I always wonder, like, how much of it is, 'cause it begins with inquiry, right? So I always wonder, like, how much of it is, like, the work being publicly available, how much of it is playing detective, right? Is that, how much detective work are you having to do for these, videos?
Yeah, usually not much, and I think folks think I'm doing a lot more detective work. I get a lot of comments, "Hey, man, stay safe out there. Like, you're digging up state secrets." And I think it's important to let people know that this stuff is public. That's
Yeah.
actually something that we're really lucky to have, is that our government does have these mechanisms of transparency. But if you don't take advantage of them, then it's almost like they don't exist. So it's kind of disheartening, again, going back to the social media stuff, to see how easily misinformation and disinformation can spread about this topic when it's all public. Someone will say some politician is worth $30 million, they're worth half a million, or they get, $30 million from a certain industry, they get zero. You don't want to say just look it up, but that's the frustrated part of me sometimes just goes, just guys, you can just look it up. It's all out there.
It takes some hustle. It takes some, you putting some shoes on and going to do the shoe leather, but, I think that I think that it is, as a matter of rigor, right, it is, like, kind of, um it's exciting to know, right, that there is this capacity that if you really wanna get to know kind of what's behind, any given, Congress member, there is, like, kind of this availability there.
Yeah.
I wonder, you've done how many of these videos have you done so far? You've checked the math on how many folks?
It's got to be around 100. I bet it's a little bit under 100 at this point.
Like, so a little bit under 100. You've looked into the books of nearly 100 members of Congress. I'm curious for you to talk about, like, kind of what are the patterns that you've seen emerge across these reports? What are you seeing in these that maybe those of us on the outside might not, who haven't done the same kind of legwork, might not see?
One thing that I found very interesting, is I kind of assumed that most members of Congress would be buying and trading individual stock. One thing I found kind of interesting is it's probably, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's probably something like only 40% of these members of Congress are trading individual stocks,
Yeah.
which makes it, again, a little bit more depressing that we haven't gotten the congressional stock trading ban passed. Because if so far what I've seen, if everyone just voted based on their own self interest, if they trade individual stock, a stock trading ban would probably pass. That was interesting to me, and then I think you see some patterns with the corporate donors as well. Sometimes it's individual corporate donors that keep on popping up over and over again that you wouldn't assume would be major political players.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess I make a living of calling them out, so I can say, like, Home Depot,
Right.
max donations to so many members of Congress. And then there's ones you expect, financial institutions, big tech companies. Yeah, I mean, you see these trends, when you look at all this stuff, and there's always outliers, but what I would say is, most members of Congress seem to be accepting between $100,000 and $200,000 of corporate funds. That seems pretty standard. Um, and it's usually from, somewhere between 25 to 75 different corporate PACs.
And, from what you've seen, has there been a, worst offender, in terms of kind of the grand total of, once you've accounted, like, what are some names that come to that you've, really spent a lot of time on?
As far as in my formula, the lowest score, I think, some folks who watch my videos, the name Catherine Clark might come up, but I've actually changed the formula since her video came out. So she originally got a 7. I think she's now in the low 20s. She's still one of the worst offenders. And then Kevin Hearn from Oklahoma right now, I believe, is the only rep with under a 20 with
Oh,
the new
wow.
formula. They both had that combination where they're kind of offenders in all 3 categories. They're not getting a lot of individual donations, they're holding individual stocks, and they're receiving a lot of corporate funds. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but the highest dollar value or dollar amount for corporate funds received for a member of Congress or member of the House of Representatives, I believe, was somewhere just over $1 million.
It's an incredible amount of money.
It's a lot of money, especially when you realize the max donation for these PACs is $5,000 in the primary, $5,000 in the general. So you're talking $10,000.
Yeah.
There's not that many corporations in the United States. I mean, like major corporations, major players, there might be 250 corporate PACs that make donations. but it's actually probably closer to 200, something like that. So to get $1 million of corporate funds, you need to be getting max donations from basically every corporate player out there. I'm kind of, making estimations here, but, roughly 50% of the corporate PACs that are political players in the United States, you're getting max donations from like half of those.
Which, to what you have to do in order to be the recipient of that $1 million is remarkable. One of the things, okay, so you've talked a little bit about kind of the worst offenders, right? I'd love to hear like have there been some politicians that have passed passed with flying colors? What's that looked like for you?
Yeah. It's easier than you would think. I mean, you don't have to. I feel like there's this idea that you have to make these large sacrifices
Okay.
to be able to have this type of integrity. But you'll see, like most of the members of the squad, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, they've all passed, you could say, gotten in that AA plus range, and that just comes from they don't accept corporate PAC donations, so they'll get a flat zero in that there, and then they don't trade individual stocks. And then you also see they're often more popular members of their party with their party. Obviously, they're controversial figures at large, but within their party, they have folks that really support them. And you see this on both the left and the right. Those are the folks who get the most individual donations.
Oh, interesting.
The people that their name, you see them on TV. Whether they're in your social media feed or they're on like more established media like a CNN.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that end up getting those individual donations and don't rely as much on PAC donations, even when they're more benign PAC donations, like, from a labor union or some sort of single issue advocacy PAC.
Right. Well, I think that's super interesting, right? That the more, I'll use the word controversial members, right? That the folks that you see people headlines more often, right? That they're the people that are going to have the clout, they're going to have the name recognition, that someone who agrees with them would say, like, yeah, I want to throw my $10, my $50, my $100 at this person because they're doing work I believe in, right? But it's kind of hard to break through the noise, right, for some of these lesser known representatives, lesser known senators. Is that right?
100%. I made a video on last Sunday. So the Senator Sunday video this week was Lindsey Graham.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So for senators, I always look at a 6-year range because I always want to include the last time that they're actually up for election.
Yeah.
So he raised almost $120 million since 2019, almost exclusively from individual donors.
Yeah.
And a lot of my viewers are on the left, I've noticed, and they were shocked.
Right.
They were like, who's donating to Lindsey Graham? But what I would say to them is, do you know who Lindsey Graham is? They would say yes. And it's like, there you go. Like if they're kind of more of a mainstream politician, they're the ones getting those individual donations. And then also, if they're in a competitive district, they'll also get more individual donations, usually more locally, right? Because people are, think that they are, it is true. People can have an impact by donating to their campaign. So.
Yeah, right. And in fact, the 2 Iowa House members that you've evaluated were both they are the 2 most targeted seats in the state, right? It's they just happen to be, it's Iowa's 1st congressional district representative, Mariannette Miller Meeks, and Iowa's 3rd, Zach Nunn, both of whom face pretty significant challenges in 2026, right? So those midterms are certainly something that a lot of local pots of money are thinking a lot about how they can mobilize what and where. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about, so you mentioned that sometimes the comments are like, be careful out there, dude, stay safe. But I wonder if you've had any of these camps reach out to you, right? If have you had someone evaluated, whether a staffer or principal, reach out, say like, hey, I think you took some of this out of context, right? Hey, I think you should pay more attention to X or Y or Z. Have you had anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I had one. I'm assuming it was staff. It came from the official account, but I'm assuming it was staff. Reach out about a negative grade, but I've gotten a lot more responses from either staff or from candidates that get positive grades. Because I can't stress enough how it's not that hard to get a good grade here. you can put all your money in mutual funds. I know that the market's in a dip right now, but the market usually goes up. You're going to be fine. You make $200,000 a year, put the money in mutual funds. You're going to be okay on that end. And then from the campaign side, these folks are often raising, between $2 and $6 million, and corporate PAC funds usually make up, again, $100,000, $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that difficult to just abstain from these practices. And so the folks who are actually doing the work and doing that, they love it. They reach out and they're like, thank you for bringing this up. Cause I am, making this small sacrifice, but I think that they appreciate kind of getting some recognition for having that integrity, recognizing that it's a problem, right? I think that's the big thing. It's not just about them abstaining from the funds that they can,
Right.
they won't be able to run a few more ads. It's that they recognize that it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most important part of it.
Yeah, when it's so funny, right? Like, yeah, financial integrity is not that hard. It's not that difficult to like to have a clean bill of health here. But nonetheless, right? I mean, I think at least from my vantage point, my monitoring of it seems like there's a lot of negative grades to go around, given
Yep.
given the makeup of Congress. I wonder. Obviously, like, when I saw that my representative got an F, of course, that was something that caught my attention. But, like, as you're trying to, like, what are FEC documents, interesting for a social media audience? I mean, like, what are you thinking about with in terms of the reception of your work on this project?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to balance things out. You see a lot of social media creators that have to exaggerate, even if it's not with the actual numbers, it's just with the tone.
Right.
And obviously, from the beginning, I kind of dipped into that. Is your member of Congress a POS? Right. That gets a very visceral reaction from folks, and I think that's one of the reasons it started doing well. People, if you poll them, don't really like Congress that much, right? So starting off with something negative where they can kind of confirm that, what you call it, a bias that they have, that their member of Congress is probably kind of shady. It is kind of playing into that stuff. So I think that's one reason that, even though it might be a bit more, boring content, we're just talking about FEC filings, it
Mhm.
still has that level of interest there. And then I think also folks don't realize how public this data is. So they think that they're getting some inside scoop and that the CIA is going to, break through my door one day. And it's like, no, guys, you can look this up. But a lot of folks don't know that. So
I mean, I've always regarded reporting as, we're going in search of forbidden knowledge for sure. Yeah, I'm waiting on 10 years in, I'm waiting on that call from the CIA. I wonder why that hasn't happened. You've been doing this kind of survey of all of these representatives leading up to the 2026 midterms. A hugely important election it's coming up in in a not even more than a year. I wonder, in your surveying of all this work, if you've obviously noticed patterns that you're seeing in some of these representatives. If we are looking to, if there was policy that we could pursue that would help strengthen the financial integrity of some of these candidates, right? We haven't done, obviously there've been some small changes made to increase the kind of integrity of our offices. But like, I wonder, like, from your vantage point, are there some policies that you think would make a difference for some of these campaigns, for some of these principles?
yeah, I think the easiest one is a stock trading ban.
Yeah.
President Trump was asked recently if he would sign a stock trading ban, congressional stock trading ban, if it went to his desk.
Mhm.
He said he would. President Biden had the same position. If it comes to my desk, I'll sign it. There is a world in which a congressional stock trading ban would go into effect.
Right.
It's possible, but the heavy lifting has to come from Congress, and that would be a real uphill battle.
Well, and let's talk a little bit. Maybe we can talk a little bit about why that would be important. Congress has both the sort of classified information that they receive, but also just the policies that they plan to support, or that they know their colleagues plan to support. These pieces of legislation can have tremendous impacts on on commerce in our country and outside of our country. that can be a significant piece of information as that you could then take to the stock market, right? In order to kind of reap whatever benefit there might be. Um, and what you're saying is that, one way that we could increase the integrity of these offices, prevent people from taking that information, use it elsewhere. If you're forced to put your money in mutual funds, right, in an index fund, right, that would be a way of mandating preventing the use of insider information for stock trades.
Yeah, and I think that there's one other aspect to it as well. I think we often talk about the short term, right? They might get a piece of information and then turn around and make a trade the very next day. There's also, there's a few members of Congress. I can't off the top of my head recall who they are, but they'll hold a lot of individual stock in 3 or 4 companies. I'm talking millions of dollars, and it might be like Apple, Microsoft, and one other tech company. And they won't trade very often at all. Some of them haven't made a trade since they've been in office. But still, their decision-making process can still be influenced by their stock portfolio. If there's a bill that's going to regulate tech in a certain way, they got to think, oh man, my retirement is almost exclusively in these 3 companies.
Right.
So you have this short-term kind of, trading stocks quickly based on insider information. And then you also have this slow burn where are they actually being held accountable by their constituents? Or are they being held accountable by their stock portfolio, which might not be that diverse at all? It's scary stuff.
Kind of bringing us to a close here. I wonder if you would, so much of your project is built on this idea that this is publicly available information that can be used to help you better understand what's at play in Congress, right? That it's almost like a lens to look at Congress through these financial disclosures. What do you, as you're thinking about like what your come away is so far, you've been doing this project for how long?
Since February. So all of February, all of March, almost all of April, 3 months.
So you're a couple months into this project. What are your comeaways at this point, right? What is your sense about like kind of that broader, if you had to zoom out on like kind of the state of our politics through the lens of these financial disclosures? What are you learning about Congress? What are you learning about this country?
Yeah, I think I would say that we have it's a bipartisan issue, which there's a positive to that, which is that in a political climate where so many things are seen as issues on the left or issues on the right, this is an issue that everyone wants me to crush the numbers to see what party is the biggest offender. But at this point, right, this is a bipartisan issue, and you have it's nice to see that there are some members of Congress that do have the integrity that make decisions that remove conflicts of interest from their work, and their work is to represent their constituents, right? So I think it's just the more I can get this information out there to more people, that they can see that this is a bipartisan issue, take their fangs out a little bit of the other party and take a step back and realize, all right, like we can work towards solutions, because if we do a stock trading ban, or if we're going to remove corporate money from politics, that's going to help both parties. It's going to help all the constituents. So that's where I am right now.
Before I let you go, Nico, do you want to plug anything?
Yeah, I'm finding Nico46 on TikTok, finding Nico46 IG on Instagram. Thank you again so much for having me on. This has been a great conversation.
Nico Agosta is a 25-year-old who's in charge of the Stocking the Capitol project. You can find him at Finding Nico46 on Instagram, TikTok. I highly recommend you check out his platform. I'm hoping he's going to do some more Iowa House members and senators very soon. We'll be staying tuned. Nico, thanks for joining me.
Thanks again for having me.
I think any time that we can spend thinking about the way that money influences our politics is supremely important. It's something that I think there's tons of bipartisan support for. It's also something that I think there's a ton of people power behind, one that I hope we see capitalized on more in the state of Iowa moving forward in this election season. Coming up next, State Auditor Rob Sand talks a little bit about his campaign, kind of what he has planned. He talks a little bit about policy. It's a short conversation, introing the candidate, one that I hope you learn something from. You're listening to Cornhole Champions. I'm your host, Zachary Oren Smith. The big news this week is that State Auditor Rob Sand announced he's running for governor. And joining me this hour to talk about the case he's making to voters is the candidate himself. Hello, Rob.
Hey, how are you, Zachary?
I'm well. I was going through your social media feed this morning just to kind of prepare for this interview.
Sure.
And it seems like on your 90 as a state auditor, you would go to across the state, hit 99 counties, and along the way you'd kind of run into restaurants along the way, record some videos that aren't necessarily political in nature, but just kind of featuring some of these restaurants. I wanted to play a clip from one here.
I do love barbecue, so we're going to give this place a shot. Actually, guys, I forgot that I ordered from this place for takeout. It was delicious, and I'm so glad to be eating it again. Popcorn chicken. Oh, yeah. I was telling Kenny how much I like the popcorn chicken bites because the breading on them is really minimal. So you're really eating chicken when you eat them. And you had a very Iowa answer for why the breading is so thin.
Yeah, so we don't use any flour at all. We just mainly use cornstarch to make it thin and less of that crunch.
Corn.
Shout out Zoe. I think it's an interesting way to use your platform, right? That you're kind of moving your way. I think this one was in Des Moines, but you're out in the county, you're meeting with folks, and along the way you're popping into some of these places. Tell me a little bit about what you learned during that period, kind of going around at some of these across the state, particularly some of these smaller towns. What are you seeing?
You know, I think this kind of goes to the idea on the wall behind me, a governor for all. Iowans are great. Honestly, like, people love this state. They're so proud to live here. They are so proud of our history. A lot of them are very frustrated with where we are right now, but they're still here. They're not running away. And I think a lot of people like Kenny are just people who are living their lives, doing their work, working with their family in his case. And it's fun to be able to use the platform that I've built to just highlight ordinary Iowans. I'm a state auditor for all. I'd be a governor for all, and my social media is for all.
But as we've seen the last couple of years, Iowa has trended further and further to the right. And I'm curious about kind of when you say governor for all, why for a voter out there, why they would why not continue with Republican leadership? Like what is your vision, I guess, for your governorship for the state moving forward?
Sure. I think there's a few different answers to that. Number one, everybody has heard the phrase power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. This state is very clearly focused at this point on insiders and special interests, not on Iowans. We have the 49th ranking economy in the country, according to the Trump administration. We have rising costs. And what have they been doing in Des Moines? When we uncovered a record amount of misspent money in my first term, they put hours and hours and hours into passing a law to gut the auditor's office ability to find misspent money. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. 10 years of the same people in charge has brought us to this point, and most Iowans understand the idea of balance. It's time to rotate the crops. They've been in there too long. They're no longer really focused on serving Iowans. It's time to have somebody who is.
You've been a pretty vocal opponent of the state's voucher program, of Governor Kim Reynolds' voucher program. And I wonder if kind of how, I think you've done a lot of work to sort of talk about the extent to which it's even possible to know where this money's going, right? I think your we reported on your press conference and report looking at your ability. You tried to perform, I think you called it a special investigation. Is that the right term? Look, you're trying to
where you're going. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, trying to get a sense of kind of where money is going and where it's coming from. And I'm curious about, like, if you talk a little bit about kind of like you say it's time to rotate the crops. Put that in kind of the voucher system in conversation with that.
Oh, sure. Look, here's my problem with the voucher program. There's no accountability for it. So public schools have to get an audit every year. We're literally not even allowed to audit private schools. There are rules for how public schools spend your tax dollars. There's only one thing on God's green earth that this legislature and this governor came up with that private schools can't spend tax dollars on. They can't pay a rebate to parents. but anything else that they want to do is legal. So if you want to open a for-profit private school in the state of Iowa, take voucher money and have a rule that every dollar you get from taxpayers you put in your pocket for profit and you don't spend it on education, under this vouchers law, that is legal, and I do not know how we would find out about it. That's crazy. And it's exactly the kind of thing that I think most Iowans would look at and be like, well, look, I was voting for these guys, but they don't seem to be remembering who they're supposed to be serving right now. Time to rotate the crops.
Your fundraising reports have already shown a great degree of success. But, in recent memory, I'm thinking of the Fred Hubbell election, right? So Fred Hubbell outraises Tim Reynolds in 2018. But he still kind of lost. Lost lost the race that year. And I'm wondering for you, what's different this year? What's different about you as a candidate for this race?
Let's just say you told somebody, okay, there's a candidate running for office who's born and raised in a small town, likes to hunt and fish, owns guns, including handguns, and faith plays a really huge role in their life. What party are they in?
No, I'd say Republican.
Yeah, what percent of people? 90% of people? 80% of people?
Yeah.
Right, but that's me. That's my life. That is who I am. So I am not who most people think of as a Democrat. Here's the other piece. I don't really sound like one either. And I don't even like the idea. And this is why. I don't like the idea that we have to, who says we should only have two parties? Who said that we should all have to be Democrats or Republicans? I don't think that either the Democratic or Republican parties solve enough problems to deserve their shared monopoly that they have given themselves. We are so much smarter than this. I mean, you've been in the toothpaste aisle. There's dozens of choices. Somehow you are able to walk out with your life intact and toothpaste. And yet our political establishment treats us like babies who can't handle anything more than choice A or choice B. I think that's broken, and I think it's a big reason why politics gets that bad and why these jokers up here think they can get away with things like gutting the auditor's office, because their attitude is like, well, we can be thieves, and as long as we convince that the other people that the other side are thieves and murderers, it's not going to cost us.
And it kind of bringing us to a close here. Were you to get the nomination? Were you to win the governor's mansion? That's one piece of a much larger structure, right? And for those of us that want to see, maybe free K through 12 lunches in school, right? As an example, that's got to go. There are several checks before it even reaches your office. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the stakes of this election, given that there are a lot that in 2026 there are going to be a lot of seats that will be up for re-election? Can you tell me to speak a little bit to that?
Sure. Look, I think we need a new direction in the state of Iowa. The first thing to do when you're going the wrong way is hit the brakes. I think everybody agrees that the majorities on the other side are so large that if I win, I'll be working with a Republican legislature. Fine. I'll work with anybody to do good for the state of Iowa. And in the meantime, I'll block some of the bad stuff that they would like to do. I will push them to restore the state auditor's office ability to find misspent money, because I bet for some strange reason that once there's a Democratic governor, there will be really excited about accountability. So I think that we have an opportunity to do a lot of good things here. I also think we've got a good chance that we could legalize marijuana in the state of Iowa, to treat it the same way we do alcohol, to help fix the collapsing state budget that we are facing right now. And I think that would be a good thing for Iowans, but we're going to need to change the direction that we're going in order to do that. And the other piece that I would say is just, you fix one problem at a time, one foot in front of the other. I'm not the kind of person who's going to sit here and promise you the moon. I'm going to tell you what I think is doable, and I'm going to try to get to work doing it.
Rob, before we let you go, you want to plug anything as folks are trying to follow your campaign?
Absolutely. RobSand.com is the place to learn more about me. Whatever social media you're on, I'm probably there under Rob Sand IA. I think on TikTok it's Rob Sand Iowa. But hit the follow button and learn more about me, and I'll interact with you if you comment too.
Learn more about him, see what slice of pizza he's getting from which gas station chain. Rob Sand is the auditor of the state of Iowa. He's running to win the Democratic nomination for the governor's race in 2026. Rob, thanks for joining me.
You bet.
That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, please rate it and subscribe either on our Substack or on our YouTube channel. Share it with your friends. And while you're at it, sign up for my newsletter, cornholechampions.substack.com, and get these episodes straight to your inbox when they drop Wednesday mornings. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. This podcast is produced by me with music from Avery Mossman. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. And until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith. Thanks for watching.